Good morning.
Well, I'm happy to see everybody here. Lovely. Welcome. And I'm very lucky to be in the excellent company of these two very well-known, very well-liked experts in the food and wine world. Both of them, as you probably know, are exuberant enthusiasts, and they have exceptional knowledge and talent, which is why they're successful and why they're here today. And I'm sure they are familiar to you through their work, broadcasting, television, writing, etc. But I have to introduce them. So, on my left, welcome to Tom Parker Bowles, a multi-award-winning food writer, a restaurant critic, and broadcaster. His prodigious knowledge of food and his appetite for good food and good cheer shines throughout his work. He's written 9, corrected already, including E is for Eating, An Alphabet of Greed, appeals to me, and my personal favourite, Let's Eat, which is a compilation of recipes from his own kitchen notebooks. His latest book, I believe, is coming out in October.
September
25th. Corrected again, thank you. And the book uses material from Royal Archives, as well as contemporary accounts, I believe, and personal insight. And I think it will paint a very vivid picture of royal tastes and traditions. It goes back to Victorian times. And what's it called?
Cooking in the Crown.
Great. That's that plug. Right. And on my right, here's Olly Smith. I think is also very familiar to everybody here. Another multi-award-winning expert, a TV personality, author of 7 books. Yep, 7. Good, 7, got that right. And he's been appearing regularly on Saturday Kitchen, BBC's Saturday Kitchen for...
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I think 17 or 18 years.
18 years, can you believe?
Years. And his wine recommendations on that programme often result in shelves being cleared in the supermarkets that sell the wines. So he's popular with a lot of people. He's been named International Wine and Spirits Communicator of the Year, and he has won Drinks Writer of the Year on no less than 3 separate occasions. Right. So, when he's not hosting live shows, or participating in events like this, or launching wine bars across the P&O fleet, or designing crystal glassware, he does undertake charity work for the Drinks Trust and, by way of contrast, the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. Right, so here we are. We have a brace of busy, lively food and wine experts who are happy to talk about their passions for food and drink, and I'm sure they won't be shy about sharing their opinions. So I think we should be in for a very lively conversations. And if you do have any questions, please could I ask you to save them towards the end so that we'll try and answer some of them then. Right. Introductions over. Let's start a conversation. And I think probably the best way to start I'll pose a question. It's to both of you. So, what is the point of a critic? Tom.
Gosh, I suppose restaurants all over the country think that on a fairly regular basis. The thing about food is that we all eat, we all have our opinion of food, and my opinion is no more or less valid than anyone here. I would never dream of saying I know more. My palate is more gilded. I suppose the one thing that I could say in defense of the critic, because obviously we have the easy job. People work their asses off, open restaurants, working every hour in that God gives them, to only have some snooty critic sort of, wander in after a couple of drinks and sort of write a few catty comments and disappear again. So we do have the easy job. But I do think that if you're in food or you're in wine, our job is to eat and drink. So over the years, you learn about what, for example, is good technique, if things are overcooked, if they're undercooked, how people are using ingredients, what ingredients they're using, how they write their menus. Are they pretentious, those sort of ghastly menus that bang on about sort of trios and tasting menus and all that sort of nonsense. So after I've been in it, 25, 30 years, you do have a sort of database, I suppose, a mental database of how you compare one French restaurant to another, or wow, that brasserie was really good and this isn't so good. So I would never say that a food critic, and I'm relatively young in the food critic world. If you think that the great Faye Mashler's been doing, she's out at Tatler, she's been doing it for 50 years. I think Jay Rayner's been doing it about 30 years. Giles Corran about 20. So you do build up a bit of knowledge. But back to what is the point of a critic? We're here for the readers. I work for the Mail on Sunday. I write for my readers to say, is it worth spending your hard-earned cash on coming to a restaurant? Because London is incredibly expensive. Britain's incredibly expensive. We don't take it for granted that we eat out all the time. Is it worth going? That's what I feel my job is. I get out there and say, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. And that's it.
Perfect.
Well, I think, yes, I would agree. I think my answer is threefold. I think, first of all, the point of being a critic is an opportunity to enthuse. It's an opportunity to find things that delight us. It's an opportunity to share a great passion for a subject that I find endlessly entertaining. It can at times be enervating, but it always takes me on a journey. There's always a second vintage every year. There's always a new blend. There's always a new technique. There's always a new wine to discover. So I'd say, firstly, the chance to share that enthusiasm. Secondly, the chance to actually listen to each and every one of you, really. As Tom said, we're here for our readers, our viewers. I find with my job, particularly in wine, that where I derive the most pleasure and where I think the critic intersects with the reader or the viewer is finding out actually what they really love. Because in the same way that we have our own personal preferences for books or films or whatever it might be, when you have a particular preference, when your palate is led in a certain direction, really I find my job is to listen to that and perhaps suggest something along similar lines, maybe something that contrasts from a stockist that is convenient to you at the price that suits you the best and with the meal that you're going to enjoy that very evening. So I would say that would be my second point. And my third is to shine a light on up-and-coming regions. And that is something that I take very seriously because we've all seen trends come and go. I've seen New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, Prosecco, for example. Where I get really excited about wine is where regions and winemakers start to produce things that are totally unexpected and utterly mesmeric. So 2 examples of that would be Greece. And a lot of you might be thinking, is he talking about Retsina? I'm talking about the modern wave of boutique local wines made from local grapes that simply don't taste like anything else, but they are amazing value for money and they are completely thrilling, especially the white wines and the rosé wines at the moment. And the other, I would say, is Great Britain. Yeah. We have some absolutely incredible wines in this country. And I'm sure you will have tasted some of the sparkling wines. Yes, I'm seeing the old, I know, some of them are very spenny. However, I would say some of the white wines are actually more reasonable value for money. Bacchus is a grape that thrives in our climate. It's as aromatic as the hedgerows in full spring bloom and tastes something along the lines of a Granny Smith apple that's been zapped with a citrus lightning bolt. It's invigorating. So I think the future for English wine is fascinating. And I really, I do urge you, actually, if you haven't tried the still white wines, the rosés, and even the reds. I've had a couple of good ones. I have. Flint in Norfolk, Balfour down in Hush Heath in Kent. I'm seeing more and more potential. So those have been my 3 points. And I think really, I'm sure Tom would agree, the thing I love most about it is that it brings us together. It's something that we can share over the table together. We can discuss it, we can agree, we can disagree, but we can all enjoy that glass together.
Thank you. It's inspirational. Makes me think about hangovers, actually. How do you go about than not drinking?
I think one of my favourite answers to this question was John Torode. When I asked him, I said, how do you deal with a hangover? And he just looked at me and went, what's a hangover? Spoken like a true Aussie, just plough on through. So there was a cure that it was a magic cure, and it existed for many years. Holland and Barrett sold. They were free, I think they were called their natural jelly beans. But I discovered by chance one day I was feeling, as my grandmother used to say, a little rough in the cheek. And I was feeling rough in the cheek, and I was headed off to a press tasting, and I thought, I'm going to need some extra assistant here. I'm going to have to call in some support. There was Holland and Barrett. I walked in, and like a shining halo around the jelly beans, I thought, I'm going to give these a go. Pop one in my mouth. I felt right as rain for about a minute. Then I had another one, and I felt tremendous for about a minute. And then I thought, I'm going to need a large multi-pack of these, but it saw me through tremendously. The bad news, folks, I'm afraid, is that they have stopped making them. They should have sold them as the ultimate hangover cure, and they'd have been good for life.
Oh, thank you. Very helpful.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Tom, do you have any tips?
No.
Okay.
I think. I mean, the days of those awful skull-piercing hangovers where you had the student hangovers where you overdid it on the cheap tequila the night before and you really feel that even thinking hurts, those days, thankfully, are over. I did actually have a bad hangover the other day. I don't know what I did. Anyway.
Hair of the dog?
Yeah, hair of the dog. I think you just sit, sweat, that existential angst and self-hatred that you feel. Water and just off the booze for a few days after that.
Very sensible. And sticking with wine and food, there's been a tendency in restaurants recently to have tasting menus, quite often very elaborate, lengthy, with a different wine accompanying each course. I'd be interested in your views on that trend.
Well, I certainly think as far as pairing goes, I think it can unlock something magical. There's no doubt about that. And a very simple example that anybody can try at home is if you have some simple mozzarella cheese, a glass of Prosecco, which is cheap and cheerful, what you'll find is exactly the same level of flavour intensity, contrasting textures, and they marry absolutely beautifully. It's a classic and it's very easy to do. To be honest, where I get really excited about dining out is when I go out with Tom and we can explore the menu. I can chat to the server, the waiter, the waitress, or the sommelier, and I can say, look, what's the off the beaten track gem on your wine list that nobody's going to buy, that you're desperate for people to taste? Because you'll get terrific value, you'll taste something absolutely superb, and it will pair with the style overall of cooking that's being presented to you. A tasting menu, I've enjoyed them, but I think these days, I'm not sure that I want to be told what I'm going to have in any particular order. I think I like a bit more freedom. I want to kind of go surfing through the mind of the chef, not be shackled to their chair.
I mean,
right.
There is that thing of the tyranny of the tasting menu. You know, there was a time about 20 years ago with El Bulli, with the Fat Duck, Noma, where there'd be like 40 courses and you wouldn't be able to sit and have a conversation with any of your friends because every time you started talking, the waiter would interrupt and go, and this is what we're having next, a spherified olive, a deconstructed bit of cheese, or whatever the hell it was. And it's incredibly annoying. The second thing is that after 20 courses in 2 hours, you hit the wall. You've had enough. Another foam smear, bit of smoke, strange shaped tower, this sort of strange mucked around food that you don't doubt the artistry and the genius behind it, especially in the case of the Fat Duck and Noma and El Bulli. Now, El Bulli was in this rather wonderful finca up on the coast of northeast Spain. And you go there and you had 40 courses. And I went with my, I suppose now ex-wife, but she was pregnant, so wasn't drinking. And about 5 courses in, she sort of said to the waiter, excuse me, is it all right if I just skip to the pudding? 40 courses. And it was like an H.M. Bateman cartoon. The whole place just drew to a stop. I expected Fran to come out with a sort of cleaver, because you don't do this. You bow down to the god of fine dining. And it's, as Ollie says, it doesn't happen that much anymore. Who wants to sit in a restaurant for 7 hours being told what you're eating and pay 500 quid for the privilege? It was something that was interesting when it happened, but no, I'd far rather go. I mean, as Ollie said, you go with Ollie, he's being very modest. You go into a restaurant with Ollie, and most great wine lists hide, as he was saying, good wines, really good value, and Ollie, like a sort of truffle hound or truffle pig, will get in there and find this one. He said, this one, please. And of course, at that moment, the whole sommelier team, oh, you found it. We knew you would, So I love going out with him because I always forget the names of good wines. So the ones I can't pronounce, I get scared of. Am I saying it wrong? Do you go, well, depending on how rich you are, the second cheapest or the second most expensive? Definitely not the second most expensive in most restaurants. But Ollie, by the end of this, sommeliers are all sat around him, sort of, like Jesus with the disciples as he hands out. It's a total joy because there is value. And that's what I love about going, many things I love about Ollie, but going to restaurants, you get the really interesting stuff, and I always forget to write it down or take a photograph.
Well, for anybody who hasn't got an Ollie in their life, and Ollie, you probably haven't got time to take all these people to restaurants, would you recommend, if one's knowledge of wine is a little limited, a conversation with a wine waiter, the sommelier, or just...
I think the conversation is absolutely to be had, and I think the technique of circling roughly the price that you wish to pay is quite a good one. So you can say, "I'm looking for something along these lines," circling and showing them. I think that's quite a good one to begin with. But I do think tell them what you actually really enjoy. Tell them the flavours you like, and if you're not feeling that confident in terms of wine, just tell them the sorts of things that really thrill you. Whether you're somebody who enjoys more citrus flavours, more savoury flavours, whether you like heavily textured things, just be completely honest with them. My thought about this is quite often I think we've all had the moment where we might assume that we're about to be fleeced and we're about to be made to feel a bit silly. But in my experience, more and more, as the years have gone on and the trade has evolved, actually the person serving is really keen to make sure you come back a second time for another visit. So if you give them your trust and you say, I would like to be thrilled for, say, 60, 70 quid, show me something absolutely amazing, it's a special day, I want a treat, they will deliver that. And if when you taste it, it doesn't quite deliver, again, be completely confident to say, it's lovely wine, it's not quite to my taste, what I was hoping for was more something along these lines. But definitely have the conversation, and if you do have me on speed dial, please ring. The number of times people have said to me, I was looking at this wine, I had no idea what to do, I thought I'd ring you. Why didn't you ring me?
You may regret that.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much. Right. Sort of obvious questions, but I think, your most memorable meal or wine?
Gosh.
Memorable meals.
Well, we had quite a few good ones in New Orleans.
We've had a few, yes.
We've had many a good one together. I think when it comes down to it, it's the best ones are always about simplicity. I remember once being in Sicily, up, just overlooking Palermo, and it was spring and the first peas had come out, and the new pecorino and some local wine that was poured from a jug. Can't remember what it was, but it was so simple and so perfect. And I find that simplicity is what I want. People bang on about the seasons, but the joy of the seasons is you're getting the first taste. So we're starting, not quite yet, I suppose the first broad beans and peas. Asparagus are in full flow. We've got grouse to look forward to. I like this time of year. It's just, this is the full flush of late spring, early summer, but really simplicity, just really, really good ingredients. And, it's like, if we're in New Orleans or somewhere, crayfish boil in the bayou. I don't dream of 20-course Michelin tasting menus when I think of my best meals. Also, I'd rather eat bread and cheese with friends than I would a kilo of caviar with a ball. It matters. The joy of the table is it brings you together, and to eat with friends is one of the great pleasures.
Pleasure.
Yeah, yes. To eat with people that you love.
I agree. I think eat with people that you love, and simplicity, great ingredients, simply cooked. A really good chef who is a great friend of ours, but also I think is delivering exquisite cooking at the moment in London is Jose Pizarro down in Bermondsey. A wonderful restaurant, truly exquisite food, and a well-priced wine list as well. I think one of my most memorable meals, probably also in Sicily, not the same place, I hope. I was on the south coast and there was a beachside restaurant. And in the old days, it was very, very much a kind of rock up in a T-shirt and shorts. It was plastic chairs. And I remember it was called Da Michele. And Michele was the chef. And I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, Michele looks like an ogre. And I always, whenever I walked in, just thought, is it me that's on the menu? Is he going to actually just pick me up like a drumstick and just gnaw into me? Poor him. But it was delicious. And we were sat next to the sea eating wonderful Neptune's Bounty with really good local wine from Porto Palo. So again, like with Tom, I think the setting counts for so much. When you feel at your ease and you feel the mood rise and the connections really come close, that's the magic for me. And it's almost that the food and the drink is very important, but they're the conduits to those magical moments, those moments where memories are made. And Jose's Cooking is one of the places in London I would definitely recommend for that exact experience. And he's not an ogre.
It's a relief. Well, you've had a lot of food and drink experiences. What's the strangest experience you've...
Oh, I've got it.
Uh-oh.
I was actually just racking my brains for something really absurd and disgusting, but there's something far better. This is a true story. Tom and I were once strapped to a roller coaster in Brighton and filmed doing a food and wine tasting as we did Loop the Loops. And our faces were quite a picture.
I've never felt so sick in my whole life. It was they put GoPros on. It was one of those really awful old-fashioned rides on the pier. I think I almost was sick on it. Yeah, it was.
I definitely tasted wine up my nose. Definitely. That happens. Yeah. Great vintage.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I did ask.
But there are a lot of odd foods that we find very odd. I wrote a book a few years ago called The Year of Eating Dangerously. It was about how we perceive food. So while we might find insects, blood soups, every part of the animal slightly odd, in other cultures it's entirely normal. And just as we might eat Smarties or jelly tots, so in Laos or parts of Mexico, you eat insects. They're cheap, they're sustainable. And it was basically culinary relativism, I suppose, but it gave you an excuse to go and eat all sorts of beasts and see how you fared. I mean, there's certain things you can eat I can eat pretty much everything. Pigs, willy, and dog. I don't want to eat dog again, actually. Not that I'd be rude, each their own. But the worst, I still find the worst. And Olly and I were just on a cruise together. It wasn't a romantic cruise. We were actually, Olly works for P&O and I was there. But we had 3 beautiful days on board the good ship Arvia, and we were talking a lot about eating, and people say, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? The one thing I can't eat is goat's cheese. It's absolutely disgusting. It's like licking the farmyard floor. I can eat cold blood soups in little roast stock places in Thailand. I can eat every kind of animal, pig's anus. I don't mind anything like that. But goat's cheese, no mercy, as they say.
Well, conversely, is there any food you could not live without?
Chili.
Chili.
I mean, at this time of the year, asparagus, it's on the rampage in my garden, and I am then the truffle hunter. I am on all fours, literally just snuffling it. I just think the freshness of it, the immediacy of it, that for me is something I treasure every year. Oh, yes.
All right.
Asparagus on the rampage.
Is there any food you absolutely would not eat?
Food hell is very difficult for me because I love flavour. I'm obsessed with it. But there is one herb that I do like, but it has to be treated with sort of succinct grace in the pot. When it's overdone, it dominates, and I find it almost as bad as polystyrene being scraped down a brick wall. So I'm going to say the word. It's sage.
Oh.
I know, I love sage, but only in very small doses.
Subtle.
Yes.
And dill. I can't bear dill.
Yes.
Too much dill. It's a bully of a herb. You have
It
too
is
much
a
dill.
bully.
It overwhelms everything.
Yes.
But the Scandinavians love it. And so do lots of, people, gravlax I quite like.
Yeah, down with the shouty herbs.
Yeah, bullies.
What about if it looks terrible, would it put you off eating it? Is it
Not
looks don't matter?
No, I'd take the risk, especially if Tom was giving me the nod. But I think, when I think of some of the stews and strange things I've had on the road filming, I would always go by aroma. I'm a great believer in trusting your instincts. So I think, just as you would, this can happen with wine as well. In the morning, when you give the milk a little whiff to make sure it's still going. Now, if you're me, I'm quite precise about this. If you're my wife, anything goes. She doesn't mind, anything's good. But I think if you feel that something is instinctively okay, then it probably is. So when a dish is put in front of you, give it a whiff, have a taste, go for it.
I mean, that's my father's like that, You go through his fridge, and after COVID, he actually lost his sense of smell, and it hasn't really come back. You go into his house, it smells like there's a body sort of buried somewhere. Absolutely appalling. And you sort of go in and you're like, oh, God's sake, the chicken. He's like, perfectly all right. It doesn't smell of anything. I said, well, you can't smell anything. But anything, you just cut them. I think very much of his generation was cut the mould off, take the mould off the jam. Oh, it's fine. Don't worry. But, when it's actually stinking and you have a visceral response, I think that's when it's too far. Oh, your generation is so wet about everything. You can eat this. Then he gets food poisoning. And,
So, yes, avoid the jam that looks like a kaleidoscope.
Well, yeah. But it is, I think, very much of that generation. We said that, food waste, we'd all talk about food waste now, but even growing up, ghastly prep school food, and at home you ate what you had on the plate. There wasn't, my children now, were having this for dinner. I don't like that. It's like, we didn't have that choice in the 70s and 80s. It was just, you eat it. That's for dinner. That's for lunch, and that's what you're having. Otherwise, you go hungry. Yeah. Now they're very, our children are rather spoiled.
Do you have fond food memories of your childhood?
I do. I mean, where to begin? Probably with ambrosia custard, really. I remember the first time I had it in Bournemouth, and it was a moment it was transcendental. I felt like I'd finally come home to myself. I felt as though Roger Moore had descended from the skies, inhabited my body briefly for a moment, and I truly knew what it was to have a really great time. Yeah, I remember it well.
Now we know.
I grew up in a very happy country food household, local, seasonal, organic, way before it was a chance to, charge extra money for these buzzwords. My mother's was and is a good cook. My father shot, fished, had a massively keen gardener. So we sort of knew the seasons because that's when it came in. But then I was sent to prep school at age 8, and and it was absolutely despicable, the food. I mean, really, food without love or care or attention. Mince 100 ways, that grey, gristly, greasy mince with the bits that sort of squeak around your mouth, and overcooked pasta. And breakfast was just, it was absolutely obscene, sort of fried eggs like hockey pucks, greasy, that smells of fish, bacon with great flaps of bacon with a sort of thick white scum on the top. Sausages, and this is not my expression, it's Jonathan Mee's, but sausages were like slurry-filled condoms. It was everything that was bad about British food, and the reason that British food has such a bad reputation, I think, across the world, because we lost our way, perhaps, starting with enclosures and moving all the way through rationing and the rest of it. But it was fodder for 300, small boys, hungry boys. And then so, it turned a very healthy appetite into complete greed, because it was just repellent. The only thing I can thank Summerfields near Oxford, Summertown near Oxon, for at the moment is it basically gave me my career, because I was so outraged by this despicable. And the headmaster, Mr. Talbot Rice, was always sort of sending messages that he was going to come and get me. And I actually bumped into him for the first time last year at the memorial service of a great teacher there. And anyway, thankfully, I thought he was he was a terrifying man, so still is. I was absolutely petrified. Anyway, he was very polite, and he said, terrifying headmasters. But yes, the food's probably much better now, but my God, English prep school food, God.
Somehow even the tap water just tasted like an angry pond. Very bad.
Oh, happy days. Right. Well, if you had to move abroad, what would you miss most?
Tom.
Feelings mutual.
This should be St. Valentine's Day, I think.
Yeah. That could be the angle for our show. Anyway, that's for another time. For me, it would probably be actually a pint of bitter, British bitter. I'm a big fan of our local trade in beer. I think when I stand outside Harvey's Brewery, where I live in Lewis, I look up at it and I don't understand why it isn't revered like Chateau Margaux. You know, it's been going since the 1700s. Outside the chateau, of course, people from all around the world having their picture taken. Can't wait to get inside. Harvey's Brewery, not quite so much, just people pushing their trolleys around, just waving. But I do think the craft and the tradition that goes into making real craft ale and real proper beer is something that we are a beacon in the world. And I'm really pleased to say we are the envy of the world at that particular trade. So, yeah, probably be a pint of Harvey's Best. I'd miss that.
Thank you. Tom?
I would say the thing about British food is it doesn't travel very well. You don't find British restaurants all over the world for the simple reason that I was about to say salmon. Salmon's disgusting. I wouldn't eat it. Farm crap. But the wild salmon was a great and glorious fish, very endangered. You know, our tradition of roasts, pies, really, really solid, no-nonsense food, and also fish and chips. Yes. I'm writing a piece at the moment, and you don't have to go, it doesn't have to be, you know, just cod haddock with a really good batter. It could be in the tiniest of northeastern fish shops, and of course chips. They're not French fries. There has to be tons of vinegar, tons of salt, preferably by the sea, looking out over the harbour, eating it with your fingers with curry sauce or mushy peas. These are great things that we say, oh, they're only fish and chips. No, it's a great art, frying fish and chips. And, you know, obviously when you go to those rubbish pubs and get pub fish and chips, that kills it. But I think we have some of the greatest produce in the world. Our cheeses are out of this world.
Yes, true.
I mean, yeah, Montgomery's, Cheddar, Keen's, Quicks. I think we should be proud. I get so annoyed going to America where some great idiots, oh, you know, English food, ha ha. I mean, look at you. Look at what you're eating. Full of sugar, fast food, you know, up yours. In the most polite way, possibly, sorry. We should be proud of our food and our farmers are the backbone of this country, and government after government has done absolutely bugger all to help them. So I feel that we should be supporting our farmers.
Right, thank you. So are you saying, in not quite so many words, that British food has rather been subsumed by foreign food, especially in restaurants? We don't appreciate it enough. We don't celebrate it enough.
Well, I think we do to a point. You look at Fergus Henderson with St. John. You look at, I suppose, Mark Hicks and his way. You know, there is this very nose-to-tail food. But then the irony is that Fergus's food at St. John, which is wonderful, you know, offal and nose-to-tail, is very Italian, really. He says his great influence was Marcella Hazan, not Grigson or Dorothy Hartley or any of the great English food writers or recipe cooks. But it's a bit of we all love it, an echo chamber. Think, oh, we love British food, but go abroad and it's a harder sell. Especially, you know, the Chinese just see, you know, you talk about English food in China, and it's the Beatles, the royal family, and rubbish British food, the three things that, you know. So we've got a long way to go. But our ingredients are just the best, I think.
So, we do have a long way to go. And as you touched on earlier, English wines still have a long way to go.
They definitely do. And I think where I'm encouraged by that is not just the work that's going on in the vineyards and the developments I'm seeing with a creep ever further northward with vineyards being planted, but actually in the way we're training our new winemakers. The young people of this country have a fantastic opportunity to go to Plumpton College, which is the envy of the world now. You know, it used to be UC Davis, Roseworthy, they're all great. But Plumpton College now is somewhere where local people can really learn about viticulture, they can learn about winemaking, they can learn about it in the context of farming, they can look at sustainability. It truly is an outstanding centre of learning. And right next door is the Half Moon Pub, which serves an amazing pint of Harvey's Best. Win!
Thank you. Well, here we are, two British food ambassadors, I think. We should be spreading the word far and wide. Actually, this is a tricky one. If you had to think of Tom as a food, which food would it be?
Wow. I've just, in the space of 1 second, I thought of sardines and trifle, and I've no idea why. So actually, I would probably think of Tom Wow, that's a really difficult question. First of all, I'm really confused about the thought of eating Tom. Because there's only one of him, and once he's gone, he's gone. So as long as there's many Toms, and I can eat from the species, that's fine. Okay, fine.
You don't have to be greedy.
No. I think actually I am gonna stick with my first instinct and go down the fish route. I think of you almost like a boccheroni. A Spanish little... It was a little fish. We were in a market together last week. No, I've got it. Wait. He's going to love this. Percebes.
Ah.
Right? Okay, so I knew I was going to get there. Sardines and trifle. Nonsense. Percebes are these little goose barnacles, and we were together last week in a Spanish market in A Coruña. They look like the fingers of a witch, but they taste like paradise. They are unbelievably delicious.
You're saying I look like the fingers of a witch, but I taste good.
No!
Well, thanks.
I think it's one of the most memorable things I've ever done in that market. And it just took me to a place of such delight that I will forever associate you with that wonderful rare. Also, it's quite risky to pick them. I mean, this is your department. You better tell us how people go onto the rocks to get them.
Oh, no, these are made, we did find them, but they look like dinosaur feet, and they're picked off the rocks with big Atlantic waves about a mile offshore. And these fishermen, very, very first, jump onto the rocks. They hook themselves on with a metal hook. And as the waves are crashing, they chip them off. So they're very expensive. But they look like dinosaurs. And you open them. My sister used to call, and you get this lovely bit of pink flesh. My sister used to call them pink willies. Sorry, a bit vulgar, but they do sort of resemble that. But they are absolutely delicious. But on to Ollie. I'm trying to think what food. I would, luckily I've had the easy one. I've been thinking about it while Ollie's been talking. But I'd say something like a really good sort of, lemon tart, because it's full of sunshine, it's sweet, but behind that sweetness is don't muck with Ollie. He might seem like he's the sort of loveliest person in the world, which he is, but underneath there's a serious core of steel going through it in the nicest possible way. So yes, sunshine, loveliness, tartness, and joy.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I'm just delighted to be a tart.
Thank you. Well, I think the moment has come to see if anybody here has questions. Well, gentleman at the back.
Can I ask a very sacrilegious question? Have you any thoughts on mixing red and white wine together in the same glass, on the way that chocolate is now got salt, chili, and many other mixtures have come into the world?
It's a great question. Certain rosé wines are made by blending red and white wine, but that's very much in the blending process. But I think I'm quite interested by the idea of taking something that is maybe okay in separate glasses and putting it together. I've done multiple blending sessions when components of wine just change everything in the glass. So I'm quite up for it. I think it could be fun. I'm not saying if you've got a wonderful bottle of wine, immediately splash something else into it. But I think if you've got something cheap and cheerful, it can be quite instructive to sort of unpick and find out why the wines behave as they do. So when blending wine, one of the things I've found which really surprises me is you might think, you could put 90% of something in and the last 10% wouldn't really matter. It's the last 1%, the 0.5%. Everything can be changed. You think of a Côte Rôtie, a red wine that is Syrah-dominated, but with a little flush of white Viognier through it. Perfumed, alters the whole nature of the beast. So within wine, we do this, but not necessarily with bottles we've just bought, but I love the hedonism and the lavishness of it. I think you and I, rolling in a hammock together, blending for Britain. That's a TV show we could do. There we go.
Well, what a thought. Great. There's a question here from this lady. Can you just hang on a second? So there's a microphone coming.
One of your recipes with lamb that used anchovy sauce with the rosemary and the garlic over the top of the potatoes with the stock. It has been one of the most revolutionary dishes I have ever served my friends. And it's been so complimented time and time again, and it's just so clever.
I wish I could take credit for that, but I think the generations... Of course, we also have mutton and anchovy sauce as a classic English dish, but anchovy is, for me, tinned anchovies are some of the best ingredients. I love eating them by themselves, but put them in lamb. They're a bit like celery. disappear, but they add something very, very important. So that really isn't my recipe at all. I nicked it, as I've nicked pretty much all of my recipes. But you know, it is, anchovy and lamb is one of the great combinations, but it just adds that umami, that richness. Well, you're very kind. I think legions of Spanish and Italian and British chefs would all be thinking, you know, charlatan, what's he doing? But yes, lamb and anchovy I love, and I'm delighted you like it too.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, way over there, coming to you. Well, that's an interesting comment you made about recipes, because they're generally reworked.
There are no real new recipes. I suppose if the Hestons and the Fran Adrias might have had, but really we're just part on a long journey of a canon of international recipes, yeah.
I would like to ask your food and drink little secrets. Marcus Waring recently said he rates American hot pizza expresses, and Otto Lengi has said he likes pot noodles. What are your dirty secrets?
How long have you got? Shall I go? I've got a few, actually. I do love a dirty pot noodle. I love those noodles that come in packets. I lived in Indonesia for a while. Actually, they're not a bad sort of thing to have when you're a bit rough in the cheek. But as far as drinks go, one of my I didn't think it was that dirty, but one of the sort of secret things that I love to have ready to go in the fridge is Fino Sherry. Good value, light and bright. If you enjoy the flavour of a martini or a green olive, you'll absolutely love it. And it takes you to cruising altitude without the need for takeoff. Instant delight. And if you want to lengthen it, thinking of blending again, you know, the Spanish quite often make a drink called a rebujito, which is a wonderful festival drink. A bit of Fino Sherry in a jug, ice, Sprite or lemonade, loads of fresh mint in there, chopped lemon if you like. It just keeps the party going. You'll be disco dancing until dawn. So Fino Sherry is my filthy, dirty secret. Tom?
That's the least filthy thing I've ever heard in my whole life. It's Fino. But anyway,
I haven't told you where I drink it.
I'm a great believer there's no guilt with food. There's no such thing as, you know, if you want to eat McDonald's, I love McDonald's, don't like Burger King. McDonald's cheeseburger is a thing of absolute beauty. 3 bites of bliss. Crisps, we are brilliant. The British are doing good crisps. Not the posh ones. Scampi fries are the greatest crisp that has ever been invented. It's not officially a service station if it doesn't have scampi fries, or a pub. Monster Munch pickled onion, although they're a little bit weaker than they used to be. We are also great at sweets and chocolate, none of that American nonsense, you know, dairy milk, not posh chocolate, but no filth or dirt, I don't think. What else another thing, those wonderful things you buy in the corner shop. They're called Hockland cheddar. I mean, there's no cheese in them at all. But they're cheese slices, and you eat that, and you wrap it round as sort of a pickle or something like that. You know, it's a late-night snack. But, yes, we should embrace bad food as well as good food. Just not live on it. Balance.
The occasional treat.
Treat, yeah. Okay, not very occasional.
Any more questions? Oh, gosh. All right.
Regarding something you said earlier, could I possibly have your number? I'd love your...
Yes. What was your name? Well, absolutely. Yes. Come and find me after the show. I'll be happy to hand it out. Yeah. Although, I mean, you can find me easily online as well. I have a digital nest there, so I am there. But yes is the answer.
We need a microphone, please.
It's turned off.
Oh. Is there a...
No. If you relay it, I think I heard you're lucky to have a daughter who lives in Florence. This isn't me, I'm relaying. Would love to know. Yes. Favourite restaurant in Florence? Favourite restaurant in Florence, Tom?
Sure.
Well, I once had an extraordinary dalliance with an American girl on the Ponte Vecchio, but it's not a restaurant, so I can't give you the address.
Tom, any ideas?
The problem with places like Florence and Milan, although we did have a disgusting dinner in Milan, do you remember? Anyway, and a very good one. I always you're taken by incredibly nice locals to go to the restaurants, and you go and eat the most delicious food, and then you just forget what it's called.
Yeah.
There's a couple outside in the hills overlooking Florence that I've eaten some of the best food, because a friend of mine used to live there, and I can't for life of me, I get sort of a bit
I think I've been
a bit tiddly and
Yes.
forget and think I must remember that. I have to ring her up every time saying, what was that restaurant? So there is a classic. We all like the classic places, the trattorias, not the Michelin star. Michelin stars in Italy. Ooh. You want the trattorias and the Florentine.
And maybe go to the markets and look at some of the restaurants close to markets.
And I mean, do you remember when we travelled around with chefs? You know, there's Simon Hopkinson's, Jeremy Lee's, Rody Lee's. They tend to like the basic places, like the tripperias. You know,
Tripe, delicious.
Love tripe. Yeah, very good. But so. Not much you said. Neither of us can remember. None of us. What's your favourite one in Florence?
Sorry?
Your favourite restaurant in Florence?
In Florence, gosh. I've eaten some terrible meals in Italy, but
I think
anything fairly, simple,
Yeah.
back to your simple theme, and where you think there are a lot of locals.
Yeah,
Just look for them.
I would say also, if your daughter has an Instagram account,
Yes,
there's a very good account called Brutto, Brutto. They've just done an eating tour to Florence. So I was flicking through, and there's loads of good recommendations there. So Brutto, if she's on Instagram. But that's yes. You have notes?
Can I?
On Florence, thank goodness, not on the show. Great.
I think I'm going to have.
Oh, yes, please.
We are brilliant.
Sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt the restaurant recommendations because we're running out of time. So I really do think one very quick question.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. You're probably both too young. But I was just wondering if your palates have changed with age, and if so, where have they gone?
Good question. Very
Two.
good question.
Yeah, I totally agree that the food that I really disliked as a child, anchovies, olives, drinks like Negronis, the bitter, the difficult things that you as a child you don't necessarily. All of my children quite like things like that now, but that's different. Yes, they've definitely. I wouldn't have been able to eat tripe as a child, kidneys, brains, liver, put off by school liver. But yes, I think all of us, our palates do change and develop. And yes, you learn to love foods that you wouldn't have touched as a child.
It's quite a very good question, thank you, and very good opportunity to bring this conversation to a close, because it was or is entitled "Age Doesn't Matter Unless You're a Cheese," which nobody quite understands, but age does sometimes improve one's palate. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much, everyone.